You're about to dive into the world of short-term rental insurance. But beware, it's a murky sea of uncertainty. How do you know if the insurance policy that you are signing up for is going to actually protect you if you get sued in a lawsuit? Today, I want to share with you the secrets of short-term rental insurance protection. We are going to cover the top 4 rules you need to know in order to protect your short-term rental. Now, rule number 1, commercial insurance is a must. Now, I bring this up because the reality of it is the majority of short-term rental owners make the mistake of purchasing a second home policy. They just go out, they call a real estate or they call a insurance agent and they say, "Hey, listen, I need some insurance for my short-term rental." And they go, "Oh yeah, no problem. We'll get you a residential policy and we'll add a little provision on there to allow you to be able to rent it out every now and then," right? And they'll even ask you how many days you think you might rent it out on occasion. The problem with it is, let me be clear, second home residential policies will not protect your short-term rental activity in the event of a lawsuit. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, if you are regularly renting out your property as a short-term rental, the insurance company and the court are always going to label your activity as commercial or business activity. And this is really important because I want you, if you have your policy now, let's say you're either under contract for a short-term rental, or maybe you already have several short-term rentals. Stop this video right where you're at, or maybe don't stop the video. Watch it and then come back to it. But here's what I encourage you to do. Go get your insurance policy. Go to page 60 to 70 of that insurance policy, and you're going to look for a section in there that's going to say exclusions, okay? In that exclusion section, what you're going to find is a section that talks about commercial or business activity exclusions. Now, why is that important? When you find that, I want you to realize short-term rentals, both courts are going to label your activity as a short-term rental, as business activity, or as commercial activity, and the insurance policy, the insurance company is going to always see if they can find a way to get out of paying on the claim. And one of the best ways they do that is to say, "Oh, no, we don't cover commercial activity or business activity." And listen, I see people run into this all the time. I've actually seen horror stories where claims are denied because you have some real estate, or you have some agent, maybe you've got some insurance agent out there trying to sell you a plan, and they go, "Oh, no, you're covered. Don't worry about it. I know it says that in there, but don't read it." Most people don't read the fine print. You've got to read the fine print on your insurance policy. You do understand that insurance companies make money by denying claims. And essentially, if you go get a second home residential policy, you are empowering the insurance company to deny your claim when you need the help the most. Why would you pay for something if you're not going to get the help you need when it's time to request it? So that's a big concern. A residential policy is never sufficient to cover you, no matter what your insurance agent may say. Rule number 1. Rule number 2. Let's move to rule number 2. Now, let's say you've got commercial insurance. Great, Jeff. Everything's good now. I made sure I have a commercial policy. Okay, but do you have enough premises liability coverage? A part of any commercial insurance policy, you're going to find a section that says premises liability. Most people just skip right by it and they go, "Oh, okay, good. That looks like a pretty good sized number. Let's move on." Well, I want you to understand, we know that every policy has this, but you have to watch the insurance company or they will underinsure you for a section of your policy that is arguably one of the most important policies. Think about this. Premises liability is to protect you in the event of a lawsuit, some injury that takes place. And this is actually the area where you are at most at risk when you're operating a short-term rental property, is somebody having a slip and fall, someone having some serious injury on your property due to the alleged negligence of you as the homeowner. So it's really important to understand this is an area where you need to make sure you're adequately insured. So as a general rule, it is a good idea to have $1 to $2 million in coverage in premises liability protection for your short-term rental. I prefer closer to $2 million. Why? What if your property is only worth $250,000? I have people ask me this all the time. "Jeff, why would I need $2 million in premises liability coverage if I only have a $250,000 property?" Remember, you are not covering and insuring the value of your property for this particular provision. You're protecting yourself from someone getting seriously hurt on your property due to your alleged negligence. So this is really important that we understand this. A premises liability lawsuit is a type of lawsuit where a personal injury lawyer sues you because of your alleged negligence. In other words, a court's going to look at it and say, under the reasonable person standard, did you have a duty of care to your guest? Well, of course you did if you own the property and you're renting it out. Did you breach that duty of care? And did that breach of duty of care that you owed to that guest, did it cause them damages? If it did, they're going to bring a lawsuit against you, and you need to make sure you have premises liability coverage in order to help cushion the distance between you and the actual lawsuit. And that's what the insurance is all about, okay? So that's what is known as a negligence lawsuit. So as a result, it only makes sense. It's critical that you have a very high level, and you better make sure you have a good high policy that covers premises liability and make sure it's tucked into commercial coverage. Okay, rule number one, commercial coverage. Rule number two, as part of that commercial coverage, you need to have premises liability coverage. Okay, well, maybe you have a $2 million premises liability now. Are you good to go? Well, no, don't forget. The next rule, number three, is you need to have a strong all-risk dwelling coverage policy to cover you in the event if an Airbnb guest, what if you have an Airbnb guest come and show up at your property and they burn your property down? Do you have enough coverage to do a complete rebuild? Or are you going to have a large amount of money come out of your pocket in order to do the rebuild of the property? Equally important, do you have enough coverage to rebuild at current prices if you had to do a rebuild? What if you lost the entire property? You know, inflation has kicked in the last couple of years. It's really important to understand what you may be insured for now may not be sufficient to do a total rebuild. Now, we knew someone in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. I'm going to share a personal story that I knew someone at a time we were investing in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, my wife and I, in short-term rentals. And the reality of it was, this individual had a cabin that was being rented out to a guest. It's a crazy story. I've shared this at several conferences that I've spoken at, as well as clients that I've talked to. And it illustrates the point here. While they were there, what happened, the guests were there, they had a cookout in the backyard, and they were having a good time. The problem is a grease fire erupted on the grill in the backyard. And it was on one of those really nice like patios. It was covered, there was a TV out there, a fireplace, all these things going on. People having a great time. But the problem was once that grease fire erupted, instead of calling 911 and having the fire department come out and take care of the issue, or instead of just using the fire extinguisher that was right there, what did they do? They got in their car and they drove away. That's what these guests did. And as a result of that, you know what happened? The entire cabin burned to the ground. Now imagine this for just a minute. They now had to completely do a total rebuild of the entire property because of the negligence of their guest. Now, part of what was so important for them is, did they have enough coverage, this all-risk dwelling coverage? Did they have enough coverage to cover the rebuild cost? And in this situation, they didn't. They were underinsured. They were insured for an amount. It was going to cost $1 million to rebuild, but they only had like $750,000 to $800,000 in coverage. They've got this $200,000 to $250,000 gap that was going to absolutely have to come out of their pocket, not to mention they still had a mortgage on the property. So think about this for a second. It's so very important that you don't want to have a gap. Make sure that you've got the right coverage for your all-risk dwelling coverage to make sure you can rebuild if something bad happens. Okay, now that's rule number three. We've got the first three rules. Commercial coverage. Number two is premises liability. Number three is we make sure and we talked about the right type of all-risk dwelling coverage, no gap in that insurance. Number four, the final rule that we're going to cover is loss of income. Loss of income is important. This is critical for a short-term rental. In fact, one of the best ways for you to know that you have a true commercial insurance policy for your short-term rental is to bring it up. Talk to your agent, say your real estate agent or your insurance agent, and say, hey, I need to make sure I have strong loss of income coverage for my short-term rental in the event that a loss takes place and I'm unable to be able to put that short-term rental on the market and make money. Now, if your agent kind of looks at you like, what are you talking about? Loss of income. You know you're in the wrong place. You got the wrong guy providing the wrong kind of coverage for you. You need to make sure that this is, because here's the thing. Let me give you a summary of what loss of income is. It is coverage to protect you if your property is unable to be rented due to damage or issues caused by your guests or otherwise. And so the reality of it is, the example I gave earlier about that Broken Bow, Oklahoma property that we discussed, it would have taken them 18 months to do a rebuild under current supply chain issues. And even now, you're still talking about 12 to 15 months minimum in order to get a build done, just because of all of the backlog of things that are going on. During that period of time, they would have to pay their mortgage. They would have to pay all of their carry costs, everything that would have come up during that period of time. Not to mention they had foregone all of their profits. So how do you stay afloat if you don't have loss of income protection? A true commercial policy can include loss of income as part of that contingency plan, and that's what you pay for when you get insurance. That's what you should get, right? So it's really important to understand that. Now remember, as a quick summary, number one, commercial insurance. You better make sure you get commercial. Residential policies are not going to cut it. Number two, premises liability, 1 to 2 million minimum as part of that commercial policy that you're looking to get. That's rule number two. Rule number three, an all-risk dwelling coverage that doesn't leave a gap between what you're insured for and what will it take to rebuild. And then finally, number four, loss of income. You got to cover your carry costs. You got to make sure that you're going to cover the loss of the income that you would have received during the period of time you could not put it on the market to be rented. So those are the top 4 rules. Now, the reality of it is I want to also give you a free ebook, The Ultimate Guide to Your Short-Term Rental Insurance Protection. If you click down into the link below or go to strlawguys.com, I encourage you, I'll provide you that free resource. And by the way, if you understand now what you needed. Let's say now you're at a place where you say, okay, Jeff, I get it. This is what I need. And now I'm set up. I'm going to have my basic underlying insurance policy. What if you're now asking the question about umbrella policies? Do you need an umbrella policy? I want to encourage you, watch the video that I have that covers the specifics about umbrella policies and the pitfalls you can run into when trying to make sure you have an umbrella policy for your short-term rental. Thanks again for joining us here today. We'll see you on our next video.